Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Goldster Inside Story. It's great to see so many people here today. Let me just let some more people in. Thank you for coming along today. It's so good. I've seen you 3 days this week now, and I'm thrilled today to have with me the #1 bestseller, Sam Blake. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
And so just to tell everybody, before we start properly, we are going to be recorded for the first 45 minutes, and then we will be able to, you'll be able to unmute, and we won't be recorded, and you'll be able to chat to Sam. You can still put things in the chat during this first part and at the end if you don't want to unmute yourselves. So I'm just going to welcome Sam again. Hello, Sam, and welcome to Goldster.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Delighted to be here. It's a lovely thing to be doing at the Friday lunchtime, isn't it?
It is a lovely thing to be doing. And I have been loving your book, The Mystery of Four, and I'm not quite at the end yet, so don't give any spoilers. This is great, everybody. If you like crime fiction, which I know lots of our Goldster members do, you are really in for a treat. You're going to love this one. So I believe that today radio and TV are in touch because... Tell us what the big story is of today.
So I was #1 in Easton Stores, which is our big, obviously, I'm based in Ireland, just to say, for anybody who hasn't realised. And Easton's is our big bookseller. So I was #1 in Easton's all of last week, which was fantastic. And then the minute the spare book, Prince Harry's book, was released, obviously he went straight to #1 and knocked me off the podium, as they say. But as every cloud has a silver lining, because it went on, the TV news were covering the book, and there was my book was in the shot, and they're all very interested in the fact how I feel about being knocked straight, like clean off the top. Yeah.
Well, you know, if you had their PR budget, I'm sure that you would have knocked them off the top spot.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, he sold a phenomenal number of books, hasn't he? So we can but everything's great. It's great. It's good that people are talking about it, and he's bringing people into shops. So
absolutely. And you know, the fact that your book, I saw on Twitter, you know, you posted the video of it, you know, that there was his book, but there was yours, a whole
exactly row. I'm right underneath, you can't miss me, so it's great.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations. And this is your 8th book, is that right?
Indeed.
Yeah. Tell us how you got started.
So I started writing in 1999. My husband went sailing across the Atlantic on a big long sailing trip. It's called the Atlantic Rally Cruise. It's a sort of a race across the Atlantic. But it's 8 weeks, and it was in November, so it's sort of coming up to Christmas. And I'd been in Ireland a good while then, but I didn't have that huge network of friends and, you know, acquaintances, and I wasn't ready to go out partying every single night of the 8 weeks that he was away. And really, I had an idea for a book, so I had these long dark evenings, no children then, and I just thought I'd start writing. And really, the bug bit, because I was in that situation where you sit down to write, and everything was writing longhand at that stage.
Yeah.
You know, it's 12 o'clock and you start writing and you look up again and it's 4 p.m. and the time's just gone. So fantastic. That was it, really. That was me hooked.
And what was the response to that? Did you find it difficult to find an agent, to find a publisher? What was your kind of journey?
So it was absolutely impossible, because I thought it was the best book that had ever been written, obviously, because it's my first book. Was completely convinced it was going to be an instant bestseller, and made every single rookie mistake, really. I literally put the last full stop down and then started sending it out. And that's absolutely not the thing to do. Obviously, the thing to do is to rewrite it and polish it and make sure how wonderful. But no, I didn't know any of that. I didn't know anything about publishing. Sent it out and was duly rejected. I mean, I sent it everywhere and was duly rejected, absolutely everywhere. But as I say, the bug had bitten, and I had already started book 2 then, and book 2 was a bit shorter, and then I had an idea for book 3, so I started writing that. And by the time I got to book 3, I had realised that I needed to learn more about publishing, knew I needed to learn more about the whole writing process, and I went down to Dingle to do a weekend workshop. I had 2 children at that point, but to go down to Dingle to do this weekend workshop to sort of learn a little bit more about the whole writing thing, I had to fly my parents in from the UK and put the list on the fridge and freeze the food. It was a big drama, you can imagine. My husband was in the Irish police force at that stage and working shifts, so that part of the whole problem of this was this shifting. So anyway, went down to Dingle, really loved it, had a fantastic time, and realized that actually I could write, but that I needed to learn more. And so what I did was I came back and I thought, well, I really need to do some more workshops and understand this whole writing process. But because of the shifts my husband was working, trying to get out like on a Tuesday evening to do a creative writing course was virtually impossible. Yeah, it was tricky. So I decided I'd set up my own. So I set up something called Inkwell, and I decided that I wanted to do 1-day intensive fiction writing workshops. I wanted to hear from 2 speakers. I wanted them to be on a Saturday, and I wanted them just to be really lovely. So I wanted them to be in a nice hotel with a nice lunch and all that type of thing. And it turned out that actually I wasn't the only person in the world that wanted to do that. And they became phenomenally successful. I mean, there were loads of people out there just like me who just needed to learn more. So that was really the process. And it took way longer than I thought it would to initially get published. My first book was a book called Little Bones.
So tell me about Little Bones.
So Little Bones was a police procedural, because I came up with this idea. Obviously I was writing, and Little Bones actually was my 5th book at that point. So I've had children, I've set up the business, I've done all sorts of things along the way. And I came up with this idea. I was driving back from the airport, actually. I'd been organising a reader's day in the airport, and it was a long way from the airport back then. There was no M50 built. It was about an hour's trip. And I was listening to a play on the radio about a guy who had written a play called The Country Dressmaker, and this play had been read basically the fortunes of the Abbey Theatre at the time, but he died destitute in a little lodging house in Cable Street in Dublin, and he'd left all his plays in a suitcase on his bed. And this connected in my head with something I'd heard years ago. I'd been watching a TV documentary about a girl an Irish girl who'd left Dublin and gone to work in Manchester. I thought at the time she was a serving girl, but actually she'd gone to work in a factory. And she was pregnant when she left Ireland, and she needed to sort of conceal all this. And what had happened to her was that she had the baby at night in this lodging house, and she was sharing a room with the woman who owns the house's daughter, and managed to have this baby and not wake this other girl up. But the baby had died. It was amazing. The baby had died, and obviously she was massively traumatized, and she'd wrapped the baby up in a dress and put the baby in her suitcase and left it under the bed. And this just stuck with me in my head. She then went back to Ireland to sort of talk to her priest, and the baby's body was discovered, and she was one of the last people to be convicted of infanticide in the UK.
Wow.
So it's just one of those stories that just stays with you. And then I was listening, when I was driving back from the airport, I'm listening to this play about the country dressmaker, and I was thinking, and the suitcases, and I'm thinking the suitcases on the bed, they've just all connected in my head. I'm thinking that all the things that she would have wanted would have been a wedding dress, and everything sort of came together. And by the time I got back from the airport, I had this idea about somebody finding the bones of a baby hidden in the hem of a wedding dress, and that formed the core of the story. I didn't know how the bones got there. And it was only when I started writing it that I realized that actually somebody needed to find the bones in order for there to be a story. And that's when my detective Kat Connolly appeared on the scene. And she became the first of 3 books. So there's a Kat Connolly trilogy before I switched to psychological thrillers. Yeah, so I got there in the end, but it was a long trip.
And that wasn't the first book you wrote, though. So what happened to the first book that you wrote?
The very first book, in the drawer, staying in the drawer,
still in
never
the drawer.
To be seen again. Yes.
Right.
No, really not great. Now when I look back at it, because I work now with an awful lot of new authors, and I have been doing for years, sort of helping them along the way, and I can see now when I look back all those mistakes. I mean, in the first book, first of all, I think I had to prove that I could write. So there's an awful lot of words of more than 4 syllables in the prologue. And it's really, when you talk about the fog index in journalism, how thick is the fog is very thick in that book. I think the first chapter was about a guy coming back to Dublin to commit suicide. So that's a prologue, which is obviously very foggy. Then we can have the prologue is about this guy coming back to Dublin to commit suicide, and he's dead for the entire book. So he doesn't actually ever have to be in the book. And there's also no dialogue in that chapter, because I didn't know how to write dialogue. So it's a disaster from beginning to end, but it was a great learning curve. It was one of those things. I think you have to write. I had to write those 4 books that have not seen the light of day in order to be able to write Little Bones. And Little Bones was an instant bestseller and went straight to #1. So I can't complain, really. It was a good.
And you wouldn't ever be tempted to rework those first 4 books, or to rework the ideas of them?
No, I think they were very much, I think I'm talking to somebody, actually, somebody sent me a manuscript this morning, and is convinced it's going to be fantastic. And you can really see the fact that they're right on the first part of the journey. And I'm trying to explain to this guy, it's like plumbing a house or doing an electronics engineering degree. When you finish the degree, then you can wire the house, or you can, wire a factory. But day one, we're not going to put you on that job because it's really not safe. and writing a book is the same thing. It's that apprenticeship that you need to serve, I think.
And so tell us about working with other authors. What does your day-to-day kind of work involve now?
So I do all sorts of things. So as well as write myself, I run a website called writing.ie, and I'm always looking for, I'm really interested in debut authors and helping debut authors along the way. So we would put a lot of articles, sort of help type articles and feature articles about different authors on writing.ie. So I work on that. But then I work with I have a writers group called Writers Inc., where I have about 100 people who are all over the world. Actually, we had about 40 of them at the launch, I think. We've got them in Nova Scotia, they're in Mauritius, they're all over Ireland, and they are at all sorts of different stages. So some of them have published 1 book, some of them are wanting to write a memoir, some of them are writing fiction, whatever, a whole mixture of stuff. And I work with them on a daily basis. So I do a live, very similar to this, with them every week, with my business partner, who is a sort of life coach. She's really great on the mindset stuff. And today is Thursday, and yesterday's Thursday, sorry, I should say. And on Thursday, we do this thing called Thursday Threads, and I critique 500 words from everybody. So we go through, and anybody who wants to put a piece in, then I go through and critique their work. So yes, I'm working with new authors all the time. And I think sort of through the process of finding the people and managing to, and I hook them up with agents, and I hook them up with publishers and do all sorts of things like that. You start to learn to what's a good book, what's the one that's going to hit the mark, and I get a good sense of when I read something how far it has to go.
And I've put the link to that in the chat so that everybody can go to that, to the Writers Inc. podcast. So tell us about that. What is it like to run podcasts with other writers?
So yeah, it's great. The Writers Inc. is brilliant. We do it's a Facebook group, and we do a live every week. So I haven't done one this week because I had the launch and I've been doing radio and stuff, but literally every week we do an hour. And sometimes every month we have an author come in like this and we chat to them. But yeah, it's answering questions, solving people's problems. I think writers all have the same problems, but you don't realize that everybody has the same problems, really, until you start talking to them, because it's one of those things that's so solitary. You work on your own the whole time. And so finding out, first of all, finding out what you're doing wrong is the first thing, and understanding that process, and then having somebody be able to explain to you how to fix it is really, really, really important, I think. And I know it took me obviously a long time to get published, just through the jigs and the reels, but if I'd had the help that I'm able to provide now, back then I could have done things a lot quicker. So I think one of my missions is to absolutely try and pass on the knowledge that I have, having spent 25 years in this business at this stage and seen thousands of manuscripts and placed some really big ones. One of the manuscripts I've placed sold for £1 million. Wow. So it was really big. Having all that experience, I want to really bring that to new authors and help them as much as I can, because I love doing that. That's the best bit.
So you said to me beforehand that you have got 70 books to read at the moment. Why is that?
I'm judging something called the John Creasy Dagger. So I'm on the board of the Crime Writers Association, and I'm a judge for the John Creasy Dagger. And the John Creasy is perfect for me because it's a debut novel award. So anybody who's written a new crime novel in the last year can enter the John Creasy, and we have got literally piles and piles of books to read. So I think about 70 have been entered, but it's wonderful, so exciting to read. It's like, I suppose it's a bit like being in a book club. It's a bit like this, that you tend to read books that you wouldn't necessarily pick up. So there's sci-fi ones, and that's the great thing about crime, is the genre is so enormous. You can have everything from romance to science fiction to psychological thriller to police procedural. So it's great. I'm reading loads of stuff that's really good.
And I just put a link to the Crime Writers Association homepage, and they've got a link on there about their writing competitions. So do check that out, because I know we have quite a lot of very keen writers here on Goldster today. So your name isn't actually Sam Blake, is it?
No.
Tell us about why you chose a pseudonym and
I'm here under false pretenses.
Yeah. She's actually not the author at all.
I'm not him.
A random woman I got on Zoom because Sam Blake wasn't available. No.
Exactly.
So how did Sam Blake come about?
Okay, so my full name is Vanessa Fox O'Loughlin, and that's a bit of a mouthful. We need the Fox in there because, believe it or not, there's another Vanessa O'Loughlin in Dublin who's a journalist, it was hilarious because when I first got into writing, people would come up to me and they say, "Jo, I loved your article about kayaking down the Amazon," and I'd stand there going, "Do I look like somebody who kayaked down the Amazon?" Really? And then I discovered actually her father was my librarian in my library, and he said, "You know, you do realize you've got the same name as my daughter, and she works in the Business Post," which is so anyway, I discovered there was another Vanessa O'Loughlin. So yeah, we put the Fox in there too. So anyway, great long name. When I'm in the UK, everybody's fine with it here, but when you get to the UK and somebody's announcing you at an event or whatever, they really struggle with O'Loughlin because it's got a GH in the middle and it doesn't look like it's pronounced. So I needed a name that people would be able to remember, that if you heard it on the podcast like this or on the radio or TV, that it's easy to find, easy to Google. So it's quite fun actually choosing your own name because you have to then, you're thinking about all these different things. There's also a theory that men don't read crime novels written by women. So we were going for an androgynous first name. So that's really where we started. Because my maiden name is Fox, we were looking at that first. And somebody hilariously suggested, "Why don't you be Sam Fox? That would be great." We thought, well, maybe not, that might not work. And but the Sam bit stuck because I quite like that. So then we were looking at various other things, and William Blake is my favorite poet. And as I was telling somebody in a bookshop the other day, when you're a B, you're at a nice eye level, and I tend to be on the Irish bookstores. I'm between Benjamin Black and Maeve Binchy. It's a nice place to be. So yeah, B's a great initial, and it's an easy name to remember, easy one to spell. So that's how we came up with Sam Blake.
And how does it feel when people talk to you as Sam?
I'm getting used to it now. I mean, the first time I was actually in London with my agent, and standing outside Regent's Park, they had that big food event on that I think his agency were involved with, and his entire office came along the path, and he went, "Oh, this is Sam Blake," and I turned around to look over my shoulder, so I thought Sam Blake was behind me, and so it takes a while to get used to it. But it's funny now when anybody says Sam, I think they're talking to me, and my son is called Sam too, just to really confuse things. So it could be him or it could be somebody else in the room, So it can. Did
you name your son Sam after you chose your pseudonym or before?
Yes.
So he's named after your character, really.
I didn't really make that connection. How you don't real life and the pseudonym. So
this is the book that you're promoting at the moment. We are going to talk about this as well. Tell us, a lovely cover. I don't think everybody
isn't it gorgeous? And it's got my son's cat on it. So we're back to Sam. There's just there is Merlin the cat hiding in the shadows, because it features him. He's a very wily big black cat. It's very grumpy.
He is a real cat then.
He's a real cat, and he's exactly the same in real life as he is in the book. Exactly the same, so he just plays himself. But so it's set in County Wicklow, which is where I live, and it's set up in the Wicklow Mountains. So I'm very lucky. I'm literally 10 minutes from the sea here, and the mountains are just literally looking out of my window. I can see the big Sugarloaf Mountain, and as you go high up into the mountains, there are lots of villages and some really beautiful country houses. And so it's set in a place called Kilfenora House, which is a Tudor country house, which a lady called Tess Morgan buys. It's burnt down and it's a wreck, and she buys it and she restores it over sort of 2 or 3 years. And we meet her at the week, sort of the Monday of the grand opening week. She has this weekend planned. So she's invested all her time and all her energy, years of work, all her money in this building. It's a fantastic house. And she's organized a play as part of the grand opening sort of events. She's got a vintage car rally and a market going on, a whole load of stuff, and this play of Dr. Faustus, which is happening in her ballroom, so she can invite the press and showcase the whole place. And basically things start to go wrong on the Monday beforehand. The first thing that happens is she gets a call from a journalist to say that he's making a cold case program and he thinks a body might be buried on her property. And that is the first things where she thinks this really can't be happening this week. I don't need the TV, and the guards and the crowds and everything arriving on top of me. But then she goes back into the house, and there's been a really nasty accident from one of the cast, and then literally the cast of Dr. Faustus start dropping like flies. So yeah, that's it. A bit of a thriller. lots of twists. It's a
And
great character.
your characters are great. And you talked before about your first book, you started a series of books. Tell us about your characterization, and do you enjoy kind of creating repeat characters, or do you prefer doing one-offs?
Well, I create, what I've tried to do is create a Sam Blake world. So if you read all the books, then you'll spot Easter eggs and maybe the odd character just peeking through from other books. So there's a sort of sense of cohesion from that. I love creating really strong female characters. So all the women in my book tend to be quite feisty, and they're all sort of strong in their own ways. We've got Tess in this one, who something traumatic happened to her in Dublin, and she comes back. She goes to Dubai to work to just try and get away from it all, and we meet her when she's coming back to Ireland. But there's also a lady in this book called Clarissa Westmacott, who is a retired actress, who is a very strong character, and she was great to write too. Yeah, so I think I love that. I love writing strong female characters, and I love I think I'm really interested in people and people's stories, and I think everybody has a story to tell, and that's what really I try and convey in my book. So I try and make them as sort of as different as possible. Yeah.
And when you're coming up with new characters, do you kind of see them fully formed, or do you sit down and write about them and then they start to appear? What normally happens with you?
Quite often they're fairly well formed. I think once I usually have an impression of them in my head. I should have got my storyboards. I use storyboards when I'm writing, and they are, so I look for pictures on the internet of the people who are in my story. Will I go and grab one? I literally
yes, do go and grab one.
Lean over here, excuse me.
And as you can see, Sam's got her books behind her on the shelf as well.
I have indeed. So this is the storyboard for the dark room. Can you see all the different?
Yes. So you find people who look a bit like your characters.
Yeah, who look like the people in my head. So this is a guy who was actually on the X Factor. So he's not in the book, but somebody who looks like him is. This is a girl who I think reads the news, and I've got an Australian actress down here. Now, I don't know who any of these people are, but they're the people who look like the people in my book. So this is a girl called Caroline, and this is Rachel. This is Rachel's boyfriend, Hunter. And you can see the different locations. There's a boathouse in it, and it's set in another country house actually in the west of Ireland. So I create storyboards, and I find pictures of people who, that's Kylie Minogue up there too. She's not in it either, but somebody who looks like her is. I sort of create those, and that gives me an idea of what the person's like, and I really have to think about them, and I try and get their name early on if I can, although sometimes the name has changed. But then literally I'm thinking about who they are, how old they are, what age are they in the book, and so therefore how old were they what year was it when they were 16, what year were they born, where did they go to school, what they studied. I'm really interested in I think people's jobs are very give you a lot of information about what type of people they are, so I'm interested in their job. In that book, The Dark Room, one of the girls is a film location scout. In Mystery of Four, we've got Clarissa, who's the retired actress. We've got Genevieve, who is running an antique shop called Fortune Finds. We've Tess, who was an event manager in Dubai, and she's there. So all of those people have sort of jobs that are, I don't know, consistent with their characters, and I'm really interested in that. So I work all of that detail out, and try and get an idea of just what year was it when they were 18, what year was it when they were 16, what the records they would have listened to, what's their favorite piece of jewelry, or I try and get some details like that about them, and then build them out from there really, and then start writing, and they tend to just appear then on the page. And literally with Merlin, Tess was looking out of her office window in chapter 1, and this black cat just skulked into the shadows, and I just knew it was Merlin. So that was how he got into the story.
And do you find that when you say you're writing about County Wicklow, which is where you live, do you find that people think that they are your characters? So they worry that
yes. When I started writing, when the kids were small, everybody in school, the mums at the school gate, were all convinced that they were in the books. And I didn't know this for ages, and somebody said to me afterwards, they all think they're in there, they're trying to spot who's who. But they tend to be not real people. They tend to be amalgams of different people and different things that come together. But I'm interested, as I'm interested in professions. So Keep Your Eyes on Me, which was the first psychological thriller after the police books, features a woman who's an ex-ballerina. There's a guy who's an airline pilot in there. There's a girl who's a jewelry designer, and her brother runs an antique print shop. So there's a whole load of interesting things. A lot of that set in Bloomsbury and bits of it in New York. So I'm really interested in jobs and professions, and do lots of research into that as well. So I'm just very nosy, basically. That's what it is.
So you just talk to people when you meet them and you think, well, that's an interesting profession.
I
I'm
do.
Yeah.
You know, you can be sitting there and one of my husband knows somebody who, this is a bit bonkers, but he works for an insurance company and it's his job to make sure cranes are safe. And so he has to crawl out along the arm of a crane and, you know, climb right up it to make sure that it's okay for the insurance. And I just think that's fascinating. So I'm definitely going to put him in somewhere. And yeah, you meet people who do the most jobs that you just wouldn't expect, that definitely aren't on that, you know, when you're in school and they're in the careers office, they're just not on the list, you know. And
Absolutely.
I just fascinating.
That's something I think that when you're at school, you have no idea of all the amazing jobs that are out there. So perhaps your books are giving people ideas of things they could do as well.
Yeah, you never know. So let's hope so.
So you started off doing police procedural, and I'm just going to take a wild guess here. Is that because you're married to a police officer?
Yes, slightly. I think it's definitely a factor. I'm really interested in books that are puzzles. I'm really interested in mysteries, and I read lots of crime. And at the time, then I was reading lots of police procedurals, and so I think that's really what attracted me to them. And obviously, I was lucky that I had that in, so I was able to get the procedure right. And one of the things I'm really keen on, particularly with the people in all these unusual jobs, is to make sure that the details right. So if you are a police officer or you're a ballerina or an airline pilot, that if you're reading it, it feels right and it feels right for your job, so that you're not jerked out of the story. The next book, actually the next adult book, is about a facial reconstruction expert. So I've been doing all sorts of facial reconstruction courses and all sorts of mad stuff, but that's really important to me to get that detail right. So yeah, so the police officers, and I've had emails actually from police officers saying, yeah, you've got the culture right. I think it's very important to get that right. So yeah, first 3 books, police procedurals, and then moving on to the psychological thrillers.
And what made you change? What made you do that switch?
Well, the first thing, I moved publishers, so it was time to sort of try something new. I want with every book to try and improve and just up my game, I suppose. So the last book, Remember My Name, which is this one, is a sort of very twisty cyber thriller. It's very, very pacey. It's quite an urban book. And so when I wrote Mystery of 4, I wanted it to be much more a country story, and I loved the whole idea of the locked room, and it was very much Agatha Christie inspired. So there's lots of Agatha Christie little nods in there, and I love that country house sense, the country house. But it was a complete contrast to the previous book. So what I'm trying to do is stretch myself with each one. So I think that's really one of the reasons for the change.
And how much input does your editor have? Do they give you a lot of help with the plot, or do you kind of send it to them as a fait accompli? What's the process of working with them?
I tend to send it a done book to them. So and you know, it's finished. I've come up with the idea and I've written it wouldn't be a first draft I'd write. they probably get about draft 4. So I've made sure that it's fairly strong. There's still things that need to be changed. I'm quite a plotter, so I like to plot and plan to a certain degree, and then but again, this thing about sort of trying to change things around a bit. With the Mystery 4, I didn't plot it in such a detailed way. I wanted to be guided by the characters, and that needed a lot more editing. So we were moving stuff around a lot more and tweaking bits and shifting bits around. So there was much more editorial input into that, I think. But no, I've got a great editor, actually. She's brilliant. She spent about 25 years in HarperCollins, so she's lots of experience. And no, she's really good. Really, really helps.
And do you think, having done this new way of not plotting as much, would you stick with that, or will you go back to your...
I think I might go back to a bit more plotting, because I think I enjoyed that process and enjoyed writing it, but there's a lot of work in the edits and there's a lot of moving stuff around. And then especially with crime, everything has to link in. So if you move one piece, there's a whole load of other bits you have to do, which can upset stuff and create more problems. So yeah, I think I'm just actually writing a children's book now. I've written a children's book and it's coming out in May, and I just have to do the second one. And that one, I think it's going to be quite, because they're quite tight in terms of word count. I'm going to plot that one out in quite a bit more detail. So then I do the work, I suppose, the detailed work, the nitty gritty, the knitting part of it before I sit down to write. So I think I'll go back to that.
And what made you decide you wanted to write for children?
I was actually approached by a publisher. So they came to me and they said, well, have you thought about, I have a 16-year-old character in Remember My Name called Emily Jane. And I actually was sitting down to talk to the editor about the writers on my network and just what they were doing and what they were looking for and that type of thing. And we started the conversation. She said, I've just read Remember My Name, and I was like, oh, that's very nice of you. And she said, you know, have you thought about writing YA? So I hadn't really thought about it. I mean, it's very much on my radar because it's such a big genre, and I've got teenage kids, but I hadn't actually thought about writing it. But I do love the 16-year-old characters. I love writing Emily Jane. In the third Kat Conley book, there's a character called Hope, who's another teenager, and she was great too. And so when I started thinking about it, I thought, yeah, actually, you know something, I really quite fancy that. So yeah, so the book's called Something Terrible Happened Last Night, and it's about a party that goes very badly wrong. But again, yeah, quite short. It was supposed to be quite short, but it grew a bit as I was writing it. So
and what do your children think of it?
They like it. They helped a lot because I needed that teen voice to get that right. And these days teens are so techie, and they live in a different world, you know, the language they use and everything. I needed to get right. So I know they helped a lot on in terms of plot and that type of thing.
They must be so proud to have helped you with that.
They're hilarious because I think they're used to me writing, and they don't see it as being anything different. I'm just like, it's like having a father that's like a police officer, or, you know, whatever. They just think it's normal. So
yeah, of course.
They're quite funny.
We've just got a question saying, do your children read your drafts? Oh, you've answered that one.
Well, they do. They read the kids' drafts. They do. Some of the adult books, some they haven't read at all, but the kids' draft, yeah, no, they definitely have had they've given me a lot of help with that.
Yeah. So when you're traveling around Ireland, do you start looking at places like the house that's in Mystery of Four and thinking, oh, that would be a great location? Does the kind of location often kickstart you as well?
Yeah, I think as an author, your antennae are wiggling the whole time. So it's like, you know, every time you get into a taxi cab, you're having a conversation with somebody. Every time you're sitting on a train, you're meeting people new. Everywhere you go, everywhere, I'm looking for, you know, even sitting looking at your house. I use a lot of, just, you know, the truth comes out now. I use a lot of people's houses. So if I go to somebody's house to a dinner party or something, or even looking at yours and those lovely yellow walls, it's all coming into my head. And so I use everything, literally everything around you is potential material. The Mystery of Four, the houses are based on, I'm very lucky to live very close to Powers Court House in County Wicklow here, and Kilruddery House, and I actually worked in Powers Court for a few years, and it's absolutely stunning. And so I've drawn on both of those and other houses that I've been to, you know, in the UK as well, to try and create that sense of place.
Now, you've got an online writing group, and I'm going to post this link so that people can join it. Tell us about the writing group and what people get out of it, who you think should take
join up. Well, yeah, as Writers Inc. I'm saying, it's all sorts of people. There's about 100 members all over the world, and we run it through Facebook. And it's quite structured so that through the week we do different bits and pieces. On a Monday we have an AMA, and people can ask any question they like about the publishing or the process. Or this week we had questions about, you know, what was a prologue and should you bother writing one, questions about submission, questions about, you know, who to approach in terms of agents, all of those types of things, and then technical stuff about, you know, the actual writing process if people are having problems with a particular area. So we do that on a Monday. Tuesday is my tips. I do a Tuesday tips, which is like a diary page, which I find so useful, because I tend to write about what I'm doing and what I'm thinking. And quite often as I'm writing it, I'll find a solution to a problem that I've got with a book. So this next children's book it starts off with a big scene. There's a big, let's just call it a big bang at the start of the book. And I needed to make sure that we didn't think this bang was an accident. And I was literally writing my Tuesday tips out. And as I was writing, I go, I need to make sure that there's a sense of peril. And I'm thinking, I do need to make sure there's a sense of peril. And I've just now worked out what it is. But so the Tuesday tips are great. It's usually what I'm doing in my writing week. And it means they get an insight into what it's like as a real, you know, as a jobbing writer, and all the mad stuff that you have to do. And the strange things at strange times of night, you know, you're talking to Australia at midnight. All that type of thing. And but also my actual writing process. So I'm talking about what I'm working on at the time. So that's Tuesday. Wednesday we have a prompt. Thursday we do the critique, and they put in 500 words of what they're writing and I critique it. And then on Friday we have usually have a wins thing, so people write in, you know, what they've done, if they've managed to reach their writing goal. I'm not one of these people who says you should write every day. I think you need to write when you can, because real life tends to intervene a bit. And Joanne Harris, because we've met through the Society of Authors, and Joanne Harris is the chair of the Society of Authors. She writes just 300 words a day. And like, if you can be Joanne Harris and write 300 words a day and be so successful, I think that is amazing. It's just, when she mentioned that, she just like literally opened the door for so many people, because I've been quoting it left, right and center, because it's it's just amazing that if you say, so every word over the 300 is a bonus basically, and anybody can sit down and write 300. You can do that if you can type quickly, 10 or 15 minutes. So and yeah, I just think it's the process and being in the story that's important, having it in your head the whole time. So
that's brilliant advice. Thank you. We have a question here. Do we have to pay to join your online writing group?
Yeah, that one it's €49 a month. So that's euro as opposed to pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have an author who visits us every month. And as I said, I work with a business partner who's a life coach and a business coach. So she deals with lots of the all the other challenges that come with being a writer. And I look after sort of the writing side and the technical side. But there's a lot of mindset stuff in being a writer, particularly with rejection being being a bit of an issue. And so yeah, she works on that side of things. It's great.
And it sounds as if you really devote a huge amount of your time to this. I'm thinking, wow, how do you manage to get your writing done as well? Because this online writing group, you obviously really dedicate yourself.
Yeah, I love it. I really do. And they're just such great people. So yeah, I suppose I fit my writing around the edges. Because I'm fairly busy, because I run a publishing consultancy and the writing website. I organise a lot of events as well. So I run a festival called Murder One. I do all sorts of bits and pieces, and so the writing tends to go in around the edges. Although, yeah, thank you, the great link there. I've just literally put up the videos from last year's Murder One, went up this weekend. So we've got sessions, interviews with Mick Herron and Lisa Jewell, and some brilliant panels. For anybody who's into crime, do have a look at those. And I used a great TV crew too, so it's actually filmed to TV standards, so it's interesting to watch. It's not like somebody with an iPhone stuck in front. I've forgotten what the question was. Time. Oh yes, so I fit in around the gaps, and I really love traveling, and I love I suppose, yeah, meeting people, doing different things. So I'm able to write anywhere. So I can write on trains and planes, in restaurants. I'm writing a book about Paris. The next adult book's going to be about Paris, and I was writing that sitting in St Pancras, and it was really funny because the Eurostar had just come in. All these French people are sitting around me. I was sitting in that restaurant at Le Côtier, and it felt like I was in Paris. It was great. So yeah, I can literally write anywhere.
We have a question here. How long does it take you to write a book without the editing?
Okay, so I write quite fast, and because I do a lot of my story planning in that plotting stage, and I have this sort of table thing that I create, which is like 6 columns across, and there are 30 of them, and I plot out roughly in each column what's going to happen in each chapter. I have a very good idea when I start what I'm writing, so literally it's a case of just writing it then and getting into the story. Now, often when I plan it out, I have these 30 chapters. In fact, it usually ends up about 75 or 90 chapters. It's never the 30, but that's my framework. So yeah, so when I write, it's quite fast. So it would be about 3 months, I'd say, to get the first draft done, and then going over it a couple more times. So probably 6 months in to get to a really finished, fairly polished stage.
Thank you. Now I'm going to put the link to your website on here. Tell us about what your website offers people.
What's there? Oh yes, I have a readers club, and thank you for mentioning that. I've completely forgot. I have a readers club on my website, and you can join. And if you join the readers club, there's actually a digital book. I wrote an extra book, which is called High Pressure, which is a link book between the Kat Connolly series and the standalones, the psychological thrillers. But it works as a standalone on its own. You don't need to have read anything else, and you get that for free if you join the readers club. So you can just download that as a digital, as an ebook. And the readers club, the idea of that is I don't bombard people with information, but they get an insight into my process and what I'm reading and what I'm writing. And then when I do events like the launch, for instance, which was this week, then obviously there's an invitation to the launch, and if I do online events or whatever, then I try and mention those as well. So it's just really to give a bit of an insight into me and my books, and an insight that you're not going to get from social media. So I try and make sure that the stuff that goes out in the newsletter will be stuff that's just for my readers club. So it's fun, it's nice, and it's great to connect with readers. So I do lots of competitions and prizes and stuff. We did a giveaway with the proof. So when the proofs came for Mystery of 4 came through, we did a giveaway for the proof and with a Blissy, those lovely silk pillowcases, and some great trying to keep everybody up at night, so you need to be comfortable. And so we do lots of prizes and stuff like that. It's fun.
And for the benefit of those listening to the recording, the website is samblakebooks.com. So a very easy, as you said, very easy name to remember, samblakebooks.com.
That's it.
And you're very active on social media as well. In fact, I'm going to put it's at Sam Blake Books on Twitter and Instagram. That must take a great deal of your time as well.
And Facebook too. Yeah. Well, that's God bless smartphones, because I tend to do that when I'm on the move, you know, so I'm, and you find, you know, how you're repurposing content a good bit too. So you've got something to say, then you're able to send a couple of different places. But yeah, it is a bit time consuming, but it's but again, it's fun too. I use Facebook a lot more now, because I think because of the Facebook group. So it's Sam Blake Books and everything. Just try and give people an idea of what I'm doing. I used to use Twitter a huge amount. I'm an early adopter of Twitter, and I used to love Twitter when we were all talking about cats and tea, and it was all great, but it's gone a bit mad recently, so I'm a bit more Facebooky at the moment.
And so Goldster's all about healthy aging. What tips do you have for keeping your mind active?
Well, for me, it's reading and writing, 100%. Now, I also should be in the gym. So I think a little bit of exercise is a really good thing. And I was very, very fit up until COVID, and then we couldn't get in the gym, and then it all just went a bit awry. So I'm trying to get back to the pool now, I have to say. But yeah, I think it's definitely, I think you need to be doing something. You need to be ideally mixing with other people too, trying to get out and do something, even if it's an online group. So whether it's a book club or, or a gym or a flower arranging or whatever it might be. One of my kids is actually tracing their ancestors at the moment on that ancestry.com thing. And that's brilliant. I've no idea how you do it because it's quite complicated, but it's anything like that, I think, that keeps you ticking and keeps you curious. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. Keeping curious. I think that's a very good tip. I see a lot of people nodding here as well, so I can see that that's definitely going down well. So you're writing this second young adult book at the moment, and what else is on the agenda? What's coming up next for you?
So the second young adult book is due to be delivered. The first young adult book is published in May, and the second one's due to be delivered by Easter. I'm not even very sure when Easter is. I haven't started writing it yet, so I won't worry about that yet. And then I'm contacted for another 2 adult books, and the first adult book I actually wrote in lockdown, so I'm waiting for the edits on that. That's the one about the facial reconstruction expert, which is fascinating. I did an online facial reconstruction course, and I have to go up to Strathclyde to the university to find out how they do it, like in person. And then I'm writing another adult book, which I actually started, which is about Paris, because you were in Paris the other day, weren't you?
I was, yes. I was actually reading your book in Paris.
Oh, wow. There we go. Serendipity indeed. So yeah, the next book's about 2 people who meet on the Eurostar, and somebody who's lured to Paris, I should say, and via the Eurostar, and she meets people on the Eurostar. And so I need to get back to Paris for that. I was in Paris last February, and I want to get back and finish that off. So, but I think that one, it's funny, when you come up with an idea for a book, I get ideas from everywhere, and sometimes it can be one hook idea that comes, and sometimes it can be lots of different bits and pieces. Mystery 4 came from like 3 or 4 different things that came together to create that story. But sometimes when you get an idea, you get most of it, but not quite all of it. And I think it's now experience now that I know, well, I've got most of that, but there's a bit more that I'm missing. And I know I'm missing a bit from Paris. I've got one character and I haven't got him sussed yet. And so I have to wait. I just have to wait. I have to be patient and wait for that little bit to fall into place, and then I should be able to fly with that. So yeah, so lots on.
And do you think that Kat Connolly will ever come back? I mean, do you think
everybody asked me that? I did a radio interview last night, and that was the exact same question. I'm not sure. She's in High Pressure, which is the free digital book. There's a little peek of her at the end of that, so I know what happens to her and where she goes. And I did have another Kat Connolly, actually, that was set in Paris too, mapped out. So I have other ideas, but we'll wait and see. I suppose it depends on the other books, and where you go. As I say, I'm building this world, and I think she might pop up in other books again, although the book won't be her book. I think she's definitely going to appear as a character,
because I was wondering if you miss her, having really spent the time developing her, and your characters become, I know, so close.
They're like friends. I think I just feel like she's gone off to do something, gone to university. Do you know what I mean? Like, how your kids go away to university, and I think she will reappear. It's funny when you're writing a series book, it's very much, you feel like it's like going down to the pub with a bunch of people, a bunch of friends, and what you do each time is bring new plot, but everybody, so they all chat and they get on with things themselves. So it's a wait and see, and never say never.
Well, good luck with it, and good luck with The Mystery of Four, available in all good bookshops and online, and really, really worth reading. Thank you so much, Sam, for coming along today. It has been absolutely brilliant.
I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you. Thanks for having me.